I'd love to. So today's workshop, as you all know, is transcript analysis creating equitable practices. Do you struggle with evaluating international transcripts? Join us to learn how one San Diego County school processes transcripts from many different countries each year. You'll be given the tools and tips to be able to ask questions. Also, we will touch base on general evaluation of transcripts to ensure equity for our students and A through G accuracy. One of our presenters for today is Rebeca McMillan. Rebeca has worked with the Grossmont Union High School District for 29 years. She was a world language teacher for 7 years and a school counselor for 22 years, where she worked exclusively with the special education and English learner students. For the last 6 years, she has been the EL counselor in the English learner programs department at the district's International Newcomer Center. Welcome, Ms. Rebeca. Next, we have Ms. Tracy Wilson, our ultimate Disney fan. Tracy currently serves as the Director of College and Career Readiness for the Grossmont Union High School District. In this role, she works with the school counselors, teachers, administrators, and classified staff in all areas of college and career readiness, including career technical education and advanced placement. Prior to this role, Tracy was a counseling coordinator for the San Diego County Office of Education, where she supported school counselors in professional development and advocacy. She has also served as a high school assistant principal, a school counselor, and a grant coordinator. Tracy currently teaches future school counselors at the San Diego State University and is a professional development specialist with Hatching Results. Welcome, Ms. Tracy. Last but not least, Ms. Tanya. As a school counselor for more than 20 years, Tanya has analyzed hundreds of transcripts and understands the importance of ensuring accuracy while balancing equitable practices. As the current counseling coordinator for the San Diego County Office of Education, Tanya is excited to share the work that is being done at Grossmont Union High School District, her previous district. On a really nice side note, Tanya and Tracy met in 2001 as classified employees in the school counseling office at Valhalla High School in Grossmont Union High School District. They've supported each other throughout their careers and share the same drive and passion for supporting students and advocating for the profession of school counseling. Help me in welcoming our three amazing presenters.
Thanks for making me feel old.
Thank you, Zaret. I really appreciate that warm welcome. And welcome to all of you. We are really excited to be here today to share on this important topic. I think the one topic that has come up from a lot of districts, from administrators to school counselors to registrars who are out there, was how do we analyze all of the international transcripts that are coming in right now? And so for me, it was surprising because I came from a district where they were doing that work already. And so I thought, well, don't you have a Rebeca McMillan, which you will get to know her this morning? But the answer is no. And so we are excited to share what is happening in the Grossmont district and the work that they've been doing and why they implemented the model that they have. So during this workshop, we hope that in this overview that you will be able to, one, understand the complexities of evaluating transcripts. I know that when transcripts would come across my desk or when I'd enroll a new student, some of them were really overwhelming, especially when you saw it come in a different language or the language had symbols like you would see on an Arabic transcript. And so how do we even begin to know where to start? So we hope that you can walk away with some ideas and with some resources and with some tools to get that going. And we're going to specifically look at, of course, international transcripts in state as well as out of state. We're also going to review the processes and procedures around transcript evaluation for your system. Because if you don't know the process or procedure, it can look different from site to site, district to district. So what do you know about it? Was it inherited? Has it changed? We're going to take a look at that. And then we want you to think about areas where you can take some next steps and ways that you and your team can strengthen your evaluation practice, even if it's just starting with one thing small. We hope that you can walk away with one little idea that you can implement and begin today. All right, so we want to get started by showing you this short video, and it will have all students who have graduated from college. And so I want you to hear their perspective and their thank you messages to their school counselors.
Sorry, I didn't.
Ross, I've never told you this, but you have changed my life for the best. Because of you, I have managed to make it to my senior year of college without having to pay anything out of pocket.
So if Brad and Linda were right in front of me right now, I'd say, thank you! I'd give them a really, really big hug.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Frank. I appreciate everything you do.
If Captain Haran were in front of me right now, I would probably give her a big hug.
I am forever thankful for everything that you've done for me, Mr. Duncan.
They really cared, and they really understood what I wanted to get out of my college experience, even before I even got there.
They would always call me and my best friend to the front office to fill out scholarship opportunities or fill out college applications.
I wouldn't be here today without him and his guidance.
She used to say, you'll never know unless you apply. Told me, follow my dreams.
Through the ups and the downs.
She said, go with your passion. She's like, I'm not telling you what to do.
She'd call me at 7 o'clock in the morning, telling me, hey, don't you want to study political science? You should go to this program.
They understood me.
She believed in me.
Through scheduling, through opportunities, everything.
The best piece of advice that he's ever given me was simply to relax.
Basically, follow your heart. And I want to thank my high school counselor, Miss Ponce, for helping me get here today.
I would not be where I am without her guidance.
Thank you so much for what you do every day, not only for me, but to all the students at Patriot High School.
Her dedication to our student body.
For realizing the bigger picture and realizing what I needed, even when I didn't know.
Thanks for all the flexibility and support that you offered. It really allowed me to achieve my dreams, and now I'm at Columbia University, my top school.
Just Bachman, if you're out there somewhere, sincerely, genuinely, I love you for everything you've done.
All right, so hopefully that kind of gets you set in the mood, because you may wonder, what is the connection between their messages, where they're at today, and this workshop? The reason why I wanted to show that is because what is put on the transcript is so important. And the work that we do around this is something that we really need to have good practices in, because it could change one little course code, could change the trajectory of a student's future plans. And so it's something that we need to take very seriously, and that we need to make sure is accurate and complete, and that we have checked all of the boxes to ensure that for students that are going through a transcript analysis, especially if they've come from out of state or from another country, that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that the information is accurate and correct. So when we look at understanding our current practices, we need to take a step back. So when we look at, we have a new student in front of us, are we thinking about some of these things? Or when we look at our practice at our own school site or in our district, have we really dived into what maybe our board policy says about transcript analysis, the roles and responsibilities, and then what are some of our policies and procedures? So before we dive into the different types of transcripts, we're just going to take a look at some of these, and I just want you to kind of think about what some of your answers might be. You're not going to have to answer anything just yet, but we want you to start thinking about these questions. Next slide. So board policies. You may not realize it, but board policies are really important around transcript analysis. I had no idea we even had a board policy on this in the Gross Mountain Union High School District, but it is something that we all need to be aware of. And so some considerations as you're thinking and going through this webinar: do you even have a board policy on transcript evaluations in your district? Has that been written down? Is there consensus among the schools? If there's more than one school in your district, is there consensus on this practice? Do you know where to find it? Could be difficult and challenging to even know where to look. Do you even know who to ask? When was it last updated? I mean, that's a good question, because sometimes these are old policies, they haven't been revised, or maybe we haven't even thought about what that would look like for our students that are coming as refugees, as immigrants, as undocumented students. Have we updated it to include those student populations? And then does it specify different types of transcripts? Because we know that students aren't staying in one school. They're coming from all over and they're very transient. Especially in San Diego, we're a military town and we are right next to the border. So we are seeing students come and go all of the time. Roles and responsibilities. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds on this one because this could be a sticky topic depending on which district you are talking to. And I get that and I understand that. But you do need to kind of think about when you're evaluating transcripts, who is responsible for one, taking the transcript from the student and inputting it into the system to match what your district's requirements are. Now, this could be a variety of people. It could be that in my practice, it was the school counselor who then evaluated the transcript, and then we handed it to our registrar who then put it into the system. So we took a look at what courses the student took. We put it, we compared it to our grad requirements and assigned the right codes to meet that course. And then the registrar's position was to just simply input what we had given her to do so. So that was our practice. However, I had also been at a school site, a couple of school sites, where that wasn't the practice, where we enrolled the student and then the transcript went to the registrar who then evaluated it and put in the right course codes. Right or wrong, that was the system. And that was all within the same district. So again, when you think about your practices and your roles and responsibilities, that's going to be very important to think about, because like we showed in the video, what's put on that transcript is ultimately the school counselor's responsibility. Because when it gets to the end, and if a school denies a senior admission into their campus because of a course code that wasn't showing up as being met for the A through G list, there's an issue, and they're going to go after the school counselor to show why did that happen. So again, there's a lot of things to think about in those details. Also, what does it say in your job description? We know that some job descriptions have it outlined and it's very specific. Other areas, it's not even there. So have you looked at your job description, and is it outdated? That's another thing to think about. Also, what does Ed Code say? What does Ed Code say about this? And we've provided a link there. Again, we're not going to go into the nitty gritty on it, but that's going to be your homework. What does Ed Code say about the roles and responsibilities? And then lastly, what would be the most equitable practice? We have to, when we're thinking about transcript analysis, we have to be thinking about equity. We have to be thinking about that tier 1. We have to be thinking about providing a service for all students. And so what is most equitable, not only across your district and different schools, but across your counselors in your own department? Are you all doing the same thing? And is every student getting the same look at for their transcript when they come into your school? Next slide. And then policies and procedures. I think this is the most challenging one for school counselors, because I know from when I was practicing, we didn't have anything written down. And if we did, it wasn't very concise or clear, or it was outdated. So do you have a policy or procedure that is written so that you do have that equitable practice across the board? That is something to consider or to look at, because what if your counseling team changes, moves, goes to another place? Then when other new counselors come in, they're going to be looking at, well, what is the policy and procedure? So it's a good idea to be thinking about that and coming together as a team to discuss what that might look like. Also, is it a district level or a site level policy? I worked at 4 different schools in the Grossmont Union High School District on my magical journey around there in 20 years. And I can tell you that it, like I mentioned earlier, it differed from site to site. And then also, how did you learn it? Did you learn it because that's what you were told when you walked in the door? Or was it, like I said, written down? Also, do you use a form? And is it paper or electronic? Have you even talked about that? Or does everybody just kind of do their own thing, give it to the registrar, and then she figures it out? So that's another area. Who keeps the original form in the transcript? I know that I always, when I gave the registrar our form, which was electronic, I also printed it out, made a copy of it, and kept one in my file, but I gave her a copy as well, just so that it kept things clean. So that's another area to think about. And then what's the timeline? In some schools that I was in, I got that back the next day or earlier that week. At other places, it could take as long as a month or two before I would get an evaluated transcript back to me. So again, what is your timeline? What does it look like? And is it written down? That's going to be important. Next slide. And some additional considerations. How do you determine what classes the student gets placed into? Okay, so this can get kind of tricky. And we're going to be talking about this as we go through the different types of transcripts. How do you determine what code or credit to give the courses? Do you have a system for that? Do you know your A through G list? Do you know how to access that list? And then how does the transcript information get into your student information system? Is it the counselor? Is it the registrar? Is it someone else? How is it getting into the system? So all of these, again, are things and practices that you want to consider and take a look at. So let's practice. So in the chat, I want you to answer this question. You're looking at a transcript. So when a new student enrolls with a transcript form from out of your district, what are some of the first things that you look at? And if you could just put those in the chat and make sure it says panelists and attendees on your little click down menu. But what are some things that you look at? Go ahead and add those in. And again, in general, not just specifically for this transcript, but what are some things in general that you will look like or that you will look for when you are receiving a transcript from out of your district? Credits, great. School accreditation, A through G course list, credits, how grades are posted, right? Are they a letter grade? Are they a percentage? Are they a number? A through G requirements, date of birth, excellent. Okay, sometimes we would get where our administrative assistant would tell us that we were enrolling a junior. And then when I look at their date of birth, no, they're a senior. So again, that's a key one to look at. Grade level, yes. Accreditations, nice. So yes, all of those things are things that you want to take a look at when you are checking a transcript or seeing it for the first time. You all have good eyes on that. So thank you for that participation.
A couple other things just to take note of, and we'll talk about it more as we go through, but also the type of calendar. Was it a semester? Was it a quarter? The years the courses were taken, that'll be important when we get to in-state transcripts in just a minute. What level? Was it an honors or a college prep or a remedial? Is there a way to tell that? Is there a legend with the transcript? Those kinds of things. There's just so many questions when we get a transcript that we need to be looking at. So I know you're all here for the international transcripts, but we are gonna talk real quickly about in-state and out-of-state. And I don't know that I understood as a new counselor that those were different and that I should be looking for different things. And we'll talk about the difference between those. So when we say out of district transfer or transcript, we just mean anything coming from outside of your own district's records. I think we talked about this. How are students granted graduation credits? Again, A through G, because we are in California. And how do we use those courses and that information on that transcript to also do placement for students, right? It's not just about their records, but then what are we doing to place them? So let's talk real quick about in-state transcripts. And I do want to pause for just a second and say we are going to throw a lot of information at you during this very short amount of time. And so there will be some time at the end for questions, but hopefully all of the resources will also be here for you. And again, it is meant to go pretty rapidly and be a lot of information, to just know that we're aware of that too. And I'm fast talker sometimes, so I apologize in advance for that. So we're talking about transcripts that are coming from another school within the state of California. And why is that important? And that's because of the all-encompassing A through G list that we kind of consume our lives with. We are the only state that requires courses to be on an A through G list for students to attend the public universities in California. Schools outside of California, if you've ever talked to someone, or maybe you're someone who transferred to California from another state, A through G is a very foreign concept to a lot of people. They're aware of it, but even the terminology A through G is not necessarily talked about in other states. So it's just a California thing. When a student, applies to college, whatever high schools they've attended, they need to submit the transcripts from all of the high schools that they've attended. That's really important. So there's this, sometimes misunderstanding that, oh, they're going to submit their transcripts. It doesn't matter what we put on our transcript. And I would argue that it does matter, because it's the message we're giving to the families, and being able to help a student understand if they truly are A through G eligible. And I'll give an example in just a second. We must look at the courses taken in that year and look them up on the other schools' A to G list. And we're gonna walk through that in just a second. And when I say A through G list, it used to be UC Doorways, and now it is called A through G course list. You can Google it. You can look up any high school in California. If you cannot find the high school, they don't have an A through G list. And that sometimes is very telling as well in the credits that we're giving. So here's an example. This was a student coming to our district. So we're just going to focus on this one on the drawing class. So if you saw this transcript, think about your own course system, because the other thing is course numbers don't mean a thing except to your own district. So none of us use the same course numbers. There's no understanding of what a letter versus a number means. We all have our own internal system. So think about your own internal system. And if you were getting this transcript in your system, what course number and title, or not title, because you hopefully are giving the same title, but what course number would you give drawing? You can put it in the chat or just think about it yourself. But what course would you give drawing? So someone said they'll use the art code and hand enter the course's drawing. Yes, we should use the course titles that they had gotten. This person said a fine art course number, FAPA. So yes, in our district, this was one we found. We did give it called BO10. That's our Art 100 course. That is an A through G approved course. We won't worry about the math just a second, but in reality, this student was not A through G eligible. And that's because if I went to the school they were coming from's A through G list during that year, sorry, this is an old one, but during that year, they do not have drawing listed under their F. So in our internal system, we have a academic course planner that shows A through G evaluation. That would show the student has met their A through G. But in reality, they're going to go apply to college and they would not have met their F because they don't have a course from that high school. That's why this is super important to go back and look at the A through G list of, especially in fine arts, many of the introductory courses are not A through G in a lot of high schools. And then I'm just going to show this real quick. Whoops, sorry, hold on. Because it said math on here. The other thing I noticed is that this particular school did not, the kid took algebra and then took algebra again. Yeah, it's a different level, but it's technically still algebra, and they actually got 20 credits of math or 2 years worth of math, and they really repeated the course. So that was just a side note of like, oh my gosh, they might not meet their A through G in math as well because they have duplicate courses. That's a little side note. Okay, so it also can work in reverse. So here's a course, again, that came to us from another high school, and this course was filmmaking. We gave it one of our transfer course codes that does not meet A through G. I just happen to know that that course does not. But again, looking at that high school's A through G list, during that year, looking at the year is really important, filmmaking was on that list. So we might inadvertently be having a student have to take another F course, telling them they're not A through G when really they were. So again, just, you know, seeing it from both sides that it can happen. I want to also say, again, we're throwing a lot of information out at you. You know, you can only move forward when you learn something. And I did not learn a lot of this until really late. So I can think of stories and think of conversations that I had with students that I wish I could go back and change or look at differently. And all I would say is, you know, moving forward from what you learn, go forward, because it's a lot of information. It's just a lot. Okay, so I will pause for a second. If there's just any questions about in-state in the chat, or if someone has a question. Okay, I don't see anything, so I'll keep going. So let's talk real quick about out of the state of California, because again, they don't have A through G list, so we can't go look and see if those courses are approved. And here's what the UC says about out of state. Now it talks about out of state applicants. Your student most likely is not an out of state applicant as long as they've been in the state of California for over a year and graduated from a California high school. But the important part is that there's no pre-approved list, but basically they say like equivalent, right? So they're a little bit more lenient with out of state schools. So for example, on our drawing example, if that student had taken that drawing class outside of the state of California, the UC would have accepted that as an F code, because there's no way to tell if it was truly an F course or not. So hopefully that makes sense. So there's a little bit more leniency given to out of state transcripts. When they say the student must have a 3.4 or better GPA, again, that's a fully full applicant from out of state, not that came to you with some credits from out of state. So hopefully that's not confusing. So when we get a transcript that is from out of state, you know, sometimes it's not using the same language that maybe we would use in our district. So take a second and just look at this transcript from Missouri. What questions do you have when you see this transcript? You can put those in the chat. What are your wonderings? What do you want to know more about? Yes, does a 1 represent 1 year or term? Liz, what is real? I agree with you. Any guesses on what real is? Communication arts, right? I immediately go to speech of some sort. I agree, Dora. But we all like to do things our own ways. Is the physical science a lab science? Gita, I hope it's Gita. That's good thinking, but again, the UC is a little bit more lenient on those requirements than we would be for an in-state. So actually, I don't know that they're going to look that closely to see if that is actually a lab science or not. They will give them credit for the physical science. So these are all great questions. Yes, why a 0.5 versus 1 in the same semester? So the good news is we know that it's semester, right? But yeah, this ROTC, it's like, do they get 10 credits a year? What does this look like? I should have also mentioned this for in-state because we should do the same thing if we don't understand. The same question, ROTC, does it give PE credit? If it does, do they need to be in PE? Yeah, good question. So, little research. Sometimes you have to do this, right? Many times, and especially I think with the last year that we've had, a lot more of our information is readily available to people. We worked really hard on getting information on our websites. So the real class it says credit recovery. And I was like, this is a freshman, but it also says support class designed, help change, bounce back, overcoming personal obstacles. So you can kind of read that description and see if you have something similar. So again, probably not, you know, like a core class of any kind, more like a support class. And then communication arts is clearly their English class. So they're English 9. So you would give it an English equivalent course. And then I did look up ROTC, and it's a 2-hour block. And so there is a 10 or I'm sorry, we give 5 credits for each class. So they would give 2 credits, which is equivalent to a full year each semester. But if you can't find it on the website, sometimes we have to pick up the phone and call and ask questions. And maybe you've had people call and ask you questions about this, but this is why. You need to find their master course catalog on their websites. Hopefully that's readily available. Maybe this is a time to check your own website and how easy is it to find information for our students that are leaving us. We have a course in our district. We have 9th graders take geography, and it was called InCon Geo. That was our transcript abbreviation. And it wasn't until I was working at the county in actually a different district and saw one of our high school transcripts while we were doing some evaluation. And I was flabbergasted, not because that school did anything wrong, but they gave geometry credit because it looked like InCon geometry. And so just, truly understanding how easy that is to do. Again, people doing the very best they can, but a little research would have had you see that was a social science class. And then when all else fails, or maybe even before you do any of this, ask the student. If I would have said, what's your communication arts class? The kid probably would have said, it was English. And then it would have saved me some time. So just being aware that for in-state and out-of-state, we do need to do some looking up of things because we all call things different names. And then maybe being aware of what we are also putting out there on our transcripts for others to decipher and understand. All right. I know this is why many of you are here. So I'm just going to go through a couple slides real quick, and then I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, Rebeca. But international transcripts are a beast, just to put it lightly, right? There's so many different things. Some of them come in English, most do not. They very unique credit and coding systems. What the heck does a 60 mean? We can't automatically assume that means a D like in our system. Sometimes it's the number of hours. There's just so many varieties of things. And so, as we're thinking about international transcripts, we're going to share how our district handles this, knowing full well that you're not going to be able to take our model and probably implement it in your system, and you'll see why. But think about some of the maybe little things you can grab while we're here. Because again, this has taken us many years to get to the point that we are. And when we have an international newcomer center, but that doesn't necessarily just mean the brand or like the refugee students, those that are going to be in a newcomer program. We're talking about any newcomer to the United States. This slide here is really interesting. So, if you're coming here from any other district in San Diego, and I would argue even California, more than likely, you're going to have seen some international transcripts based on these numbers, right? Yes, the most we see are from Mexico. A huge chunk, and then the Philippines and China, and in our district specifically, it's the Middle East. But this is an interesting statistic. WASC reports like this kind of information too. So if you're looking for some data, this is a really good one. They update it every 5 years, so the new one should be coming out soon. Okay, so Grossmont District, just in case you don't know who we are a high school only district, 9th through 12th in the East County. We cover all of the East County of San Diego. We have 9 comprehensive sites and a few alternative programs. We also have 2 charter schools that kind of are in our boundaries, but the numbers we're going to talk about are not included in our charter school high schools. So we have about 16,000 students total in those grades 9 through 12 across our district. And we have over 2,400 English learners planned for next year. Our largest high school for next year is about 2,500. And we go down to about 1,200. So we could open up a high school just for our English learners, just to give you the magnitude of the number of students that we serve. Most are long-term English learners by definition, which is they've been in the United States more than 5 years. However, we do have a large refugee population from the Middle East. And we translate, I would say, in a COVID year, even a little bit less than probably the 150, but can go up to almost 300 transcripts from students that are not from the United States every year. So as you can imagine, that was that has grown over the last couple of years. But these are the countries that our students are coming from. The ones that are highlighted are our most popular or the most we see. But Rebecca will share some stories of seeing transcripts from all of these countries. And then just to give another perspective, these are all the languages from our home language survey of the students we are serving. And I worked at El Cajon Valley High School as an assistant principal. And there was one point where our beginning EL class, I think it had 17 students and 11 languages were represented in that one class. At one point, it was a little overwhelming for that teacher, just all the different languages. But as you can see, of course, English is our largest, and then Spanish. And then our Arabic and Chaldean as a district is only 10%, but we have a couple schools that meet the threshold of the 15% that they have to provide all of the information for parents, not only in Spanish, but also in Arabic. So that became instantly, a need in our district. I thought I had another slide. It's great. Maybe Rebecca will go over it. You will see that we have, did I miss it? Sorry, let me look at something real quick. Oh yeah, I did, sorry. Back under who is GUHSD. So we have a whole newcomer center, and any student that is new to our district and new to the United States comes through that newcomer center. And we have a director, there's a curriculum specialist, there's a counselor, an assessment tech, and then we have translation services. We have 3 full-time Spanish translators and 2 Arabic speaking translators. So when I say like you can't take our model, no one's gonna just automatically have a full system, but we have with us today that counselor, and she is going to share kind of the journey she goes through and just listen and take in her process, because I do think that's a lot of things you can emulate and learn from. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Rebecca.
Hi, welcome everybody. So Tracy, what are we doing? Can we change the slide? I don't have, okay, well, we are lucky in our district to have a newcomer center where I'm able to meet with all the newcomers into our school district, which is wonderful because we are able to actually have interviews with the parents and with the students in order to do their transcripts. Tracy, go back. There we go, perfect. Okay, so in our district, we have a flow where we meet the student to the transcript being evaluated at the end. So when a student is new to the district, we look at every single kid, and if the student needs to be assessed as an English language learner, we have them come to our office, and I request that they bring transcripts so we can have the student being assessed to see what the level of English is, and at the same time, we can go over transcripts. The transcript needs to be translated most of the times because they are not in English. And as we go, this is kind of like our flow chart: part interviewed, transcript translated, transcript evaluated, and then we send it to this site counselor. But I'll go for more in depth. Can we move the slide? Okay. So the parent interview that I do with the students, we look through the educational history. Talking to the parent and the student is very important to identify the gaps in schooling. Many students come that have not been in school, or they were in a refugee camp and they were not in school, then they were schooled for a little bit, and then they were not schooled because they were trying to get into the United States. So they may have a lot of gaps, and obviously they might come with no transcripts, and we're trying to figure out with them like what to do. We also tried to see what was the schooling system that they come from, how many years they did of school, what type of course they were taking, and what was actually taught. And we tried to get resources for the family and the student before we send them into their school system. Can we move? So for transcript evaluation, as I say, most transcripts will not come in English. They're usually in their language. Some families, especially the ones from China, will have the transcripts translated already for us, but most of them, they're not. So we need to first get them translated verbatim so we can actually do some evaluation. So we have some resources. We usually go to see what it would be the direct transfer from our grading system into another school grading system. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but you can always call me if you have any questions. And then we applied the the courses that will give the most to the student, because our goal is not only to have the student graduate, but we want to make sure that they're ready, college ready. Okay.
Rebecca, can you just share real quick what these two resources are?
Yes, so the Scholar grade conversion, if you can press on it, because I have no access to do that, that would get us, it's a grade conversion. So basically you can type any country there and it will give you well, Afghanistan is very similar to what we have, but let's go try. So go to another one. Anything. Similar. So there's gonna find, you know, Iraq, if you go to Iraq, that's very different. Okay, so if you look in Iraq, a student that comes with a 60 to a 69% is a B. And we have seen in our district that before we had this type of system, there would be counselors saying, well, the student got a 50 in their class, they fail. And when we did some review, we realized, no, if they have a 50, they have a C, they pass the class. So it's important to see what would be the scale in the country, what would translate into our system to give them the right type of grading. We don't want to fail students or give them a higher grade that they actually acquire in the country. Okay, so Global Village is a great resource. We are lucky in our district that we have translators and we have resources within the district. But every so often we will find a language that we cannot translate because we don't have the resources. So if I had a transcript that came in Leo or let's see, what can I, in Khmer, or I send them to this company and they are great at translating transcripts for us. They do all those languages that you have there, and the turnaround is very fast. That's one thing that you want to do is, like, when you're evaluating a transcript, just like with any other student, you want to get them evaluated as soon as possible. So when this family goes and gets grading in, they're gonna get classes. They have what they did before and they are placed in the right classes and they're not repeating classes that they already taken.
Rebecca, there's a question about payment. Like, do you know how much those translations cost?
Honestly, I don't, because I am not the one that paying for that. Our secretary is the one that deals with that. As I say, most of the transcripts, luckily, we get to translate it within house.
But I would, you know, argue is not the right word. I would say that if you cannot do it within your district, like we have an obligation to get that translated.
So another thing when you're evaluating documents, there's a lot of things that you need to consider. You need to make sure first about the load, language other than English. Most students that were going to school in a language that is another one and were passing classes, even if they were not taking that class as a course, they should receive the credit, because if they're taking all the classes like science and social studies in another language, maybe Russian, the student obviously is able to read, write, understand Russian, so that we should grant them that credit. In our district, we have a board policy that we can only give them up to 70 credits. So I try to give all the students all the courses that they need for graduation and what would be meeting, in our case, the A through G, if qualify for that. The other thing that you need to know is like, what is the country like? There's many countries that their school year goes from February to November, and they come to you in December. They have already completed the school year, so you have to grant all those credits. Any questions? No questions.
That was a lot of information. I'm gonna, the slide that I skipped when I was fumbling through there, I apologize. I do want to share our board policy because we talked a little bit about that. You know, our board policy, it's a lot of words here, but basically the two things I want you to see is that it does say it's evaluated by a trained certificated staff member. And then Rebeca alluded to, our policy states that a student can only earn up to 70 credits. So we're a 5 credit per semester course. So that's equivalent to 7 classes each semester. We do not have that same language in place for students coming from not international. But for whatever reason, that's our policy. And actually it really works. And when Rebeca talks about adding the courses at the bottom of that sheet, you know, we are still very much looking at best interest of student, but there are some international schools that, you know, students take like 20 classes in a year, and, you know, we could have graduates in 10th grade if we did that. And so Rebeca, I don't know if you want to touch a little bit more on that and why.
Yeah, there's so many different countries that will definitely, like say, Tracy, 20 credits or 20 classes in a year. So we want to make sure that looking at our normal freshman year, what our students taking freshman year, I want to match what our freshmen would be taking to what the transcript means. All the other courses, obviously we will not get them credit because our board policy, but I always keep a copy of the transcript and the translation. So if there's a question, hey, can we change this class because for whatever reason the counselor made a mistake and repeated that class for something else, I have ability to go back and say, oh yeah, absolutely. They already completed this other class. We can put that in lieu of what you have.
Thank you.
No problem.
Right, we talked about this. All right, any other questions on anything? There was a question about finding the school year info. And then mixed science classes, Rebeca. What do we do with those mixed science classes?
Well, depends. Some transcripts come like the student completed 3 science classes in any given year. They come with physics, chemistry, and biology. So what usually I do, what is a regular freshman taking in the United States or in our district in freshman year? So freshman year, they will get the credit for the freshman class. Sophomore year, the sophomore class. So basically in 9th grade, they would get credit for science or conceptual physics, because that would be something typical that a student would take. In sophomore year, usually our students are taking biology. So they would only receive the credit for biology. Instead of receiving the credits for chemistry, physics, and biology 3 years in a row, they would only receive 1 at a time. Ultimately, that's what they would be needing for graduation. And moving forward towards college admissions, they will have to submit their transcripts. So if they took 20 science classes during their high school career before they came to us, the college will be able to assess that at their end.
Thank you. Okay, what about the generic math?
Well, I do a lot of research, tried to figure out what were they taking in math. So in my transcript evaluation, it says /math, but I would look back at what level of math course they come. We used to give them a math assessment before they came to us. So if a student was assessing pre-calculus, obviously I knew that the class that they took, it was not a basic algebra, but they were actually in freshman year, probably taking a geometry. I know we have moved now to integrated math, but they would be, so I go backwards. If you test out at a pre-calculus, then what you took last year was probably an integrated math 3. So maybe freshman year you were in an integrated math 2. Try to be, to give them what they deserve.
I think math is one of those that we can see a lot of inequities in for students who don't speak English, right? They are, especially if they have been in school, when we put them in like a math 1 or a pre-algebra because they're not an English speaker, that's not necessarily the right placement for them, right?
Correct. So we try to place them correctly to their level of ability, not to the level of English.
Yes, and there's even a comment about we do that sometimes with our not necessarily international students, but just anybody who speaks a different language. Sometimes we make that assumption. There is also a question about maybe not necessarily for international, but the integrated sciences and when we're evaluating transcripts. I do think that's probably the same as math as far as you want to ask the student, was that more of a physical or a life science? Sometimes if it's in the state of California, you can go look up that science course, one on the school site's website, but also on the A to G list, because it will tell you if it's if how they designated it, whether it's a physical or a biological science. That's kind of the trickier way to get through it. How do you count English from international transcript?
Okay, so we have a course transfer, a transfer code that it would be for kind of like an English as a second language that we grant the students. However, not everybody received this course. So because I get to test every single brand new student that comes to the district, they take the LPAC with me. If the student receives an IFEP, so their initial fluent speakers, that tells me that probably the English class that they were taking was a college prep. So we will give them the college prep course for their transfer. Yet all the students that come and test that they're English learners, we will give them the EL course code for transfer credit.
Rebecca, can you also touch on how if it's an English speaking school and maybe their native language course, or if it's a non-English speaking school they were in and they took an English course, how that could potentially be used for LOAT, or how the colleges see that for LOAT?
Okay, right. So if a student, rephrase your question.
Sorry, I know that like specifically for colleges, they could potentially use their English as their language other than English, which is really a dumb term, but it's their language other than their native language, right? So if they attended a school that was not primarily taught in English, but they took an English course, they actually could have met the LOAT by taking their English.
That is correct. So yeah, looking at college admission, their primary language becomes what would be their English, and their foreign language, which would have been English, becomes their LOAT. So basically it's reverse. You were getting all your education in Spanish, therefore your primary language is Spanish. That would be kind of like transfer into your English for college admission. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Luz. It's, their language of instruction, that becomes their what they're literate in, right? Now, that doesn't mean for high school evaluation credits that we're going to give them LOAT credit or give them English credit for taking their Spanish class, right? But that's how the colleges see it. And so sometimes we inadvertently put students in a language course because they want to be A through G, and they truly have already met their LOAT, and we don't need to burden them with learning a third. I mean, they want to learn a third language, wonderful, but sometimes students feel like they have to take on that third language, and truly they have already met their LOAT.
And sometimes it's not very good for the students, since they're learning English, but try to learn a second language or a third language on top of it.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Kathleen. UC looks at language arts for Spanish in Mexico and the English is looked at as the LOTE.
Thank you.
That was said much more clearly than I did.
Yeah.
There was a question, Rebecca, around this particular district or school requires transcripts come translated already in order for them to give credits. Do you know where maybe in ed code or in some sort of a law, language, that burden really should be on us to also get translated? Or have you seen it in other places where the family has to come with it translated? And then maybe the pros and cons of that.
I've never seen that in ed code that the family has to bring it translated. It is up to the school district, my understanding, to translate the transcript. One of the concerns that I would have, unless it was translated by an accredited translation company, that the parent might feel that they can do the translation, and that's something that you don't want a parent or a relative, because obviously they can make changes without, especially if it's a language that you cannot read. If they bring me something in Arabic and I cannot read it, and then the parent brings me a translation that a relative did, they could be changing also the grades in the transcript. And we don't want that.
Someone is sharing that in LA Unified, they require the families to have it translated. And my guess would be that they're requiring it to have it translated through a service.
Correct.
I don't know, part of me feels a little bit like, how is that any different than requiring a student to pay for their band clothes, right? Like, I don't know, that feels a little, but I can't, if that's what the policy is, I just feel like that's an undue burden on a family, especially if they are coming with very limited resources. That just feels like a huge equity issue, putting that burden, that cost on a family.
Especially when some of the translations are very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did discover, we touched on it really quickly. We did discover some fraudulent transcripts, and it was one of my parent liaisons who happened to see, and it was in Arabic, which if you know Arabic, it's very symbolic and it reads
left to right.
Thank you. I was like trying to do it. And he noticed that the student was a male, but the description of kind of the grading that the teacher kind of gave notes on spoke in a female tone. And so we had discovered it was actually the sister's transcript that they had just changed the name on. And so we started to do some work, and Rebecca could speak to it more if you have questions later, working with the embassies.
Or the school boards of the country, in order to check if any time there's a question, you can always check.
They validate it for us, right? They look at it and say, yes, this is an accurate a transcript.
The only downside to doing that with every transcript is sometimes they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
To come back.
There's also a comment that a lot of times those credits usually just go to electives. And I do feel like that is also an equity issue, right? And especially now with AB 2121, I know we don't have tons of time to go into that, but if you have newcomers who come to your district in 11th or 12th grade, and there's some caveats to it. I don't want to be that simplistic, but they fall under the same type of law or ed code that homeless and foster and those that are in the system do. And that's, they can meet the state min requirements now. That law went into effect in 2018. And so we've just really started looking at our newcomers. And so, if they need to meet the state minimum requirements, we need to be giving them credit for the state minimum requirements and not just elective credits. Now, if you think about a newcomer, they still have to, the state min requirements are US history, American government, 3 years of English. So it's not like they're going to come and be able to graduate right away, but really looking at our systems and do we need to have them start in other courses, or can they take some sort of a US history or government course, grade level equivalent in 11th and 12th grade? That's a whole nother philosophical discussion, but the question, Rebecca, is do you do pass or fail instead of a letter grade, or do you give the letter grade?
We give the letter grade. That's why we look at what would be the equivalent for the country that the student is coming from to what would be the equivalent to the our transcripts, and we give them the letter grade.
Thank you. I hope I didn't miss any questions. Tanya or Zarette, can you double check and make sure?
I'm not seeing any on there.
Okay, so I do want to share this quote with you because again, we rapid fired and have you thinking about a lot of different things, international, in-state, A through G lists, all that stuff. And this last year, in the midst of all the crazy, we did a book study called Tech Like a Pirate. I highly recommend the book if you are looking for some sort of fun summer reading. But the quote in there was, being overwhelmed is not about having too much to do. It's about not knowing where to start. And I think this resonates with this because there's so much and so many areas you can tackle that I really want you to start small, start with impact, like where's the biggest, right? Like impact going to happen. And even start with excitement. Like, this is advocating for students and families in a way that maybe hasn't been done before in your district or at your school site. I would also advocate for what I call calibration time. We never did this, and I wish I could go back and do it now, but we're not even talking about different school sites doing things differently. I could be doing something different than Tanya next door. Not because either one of us is doing anything wrong. We just don't really have had the training. We don't understand it. We're doing the very best we can with very limited information. So I would suggest starting with a calibration activity, whether it's your school site or your district. If you're a lone counselor, like in a charter school, I would bring in Tanya. Sorry, Tanya, I'm adding to your plate, but bring in Tanya with maybe some other independent counselors together and take a transcript, an international transcript that has been translated, and all sit down and individually evaluate it. And then let's have a conversation. Let's sit and talk about why we gave it the credits that we gave it. Right? Like that to me is a very simple place to start. And it needs to be a safe place, right? It can't be a no or a, people, and I know the personalities can happen. And maybe that's why bringing in a facilitator like Tanya could help guide that conversation, because there could be strong feelings. I have run into that where there are some very strong feelings about what is right or wrong in transcript evaluation. But as long as we keep students' best interest, that's what the colleges do. I don't know why we don't. Student, in support of the student in the best way possible. And we also, this is going to sound a little crazy, but we also need to be okay with that maybe the US educational system isn't necessarily better than another one coming from another country. Like that assumption, that bias exists. Right. And I've heard people say like, oh, they don't get the same kind of education in Mexico, or they don't get the same kind of education. Like we need to challenge that thinking a little bit, like best interest of student. So that would be where I'd suggest you start, is just really looking at your own system, look at your own board policies, because you can't make these changes, even if it's the right thing to do, if it goes against your board policy. That you'll drive yourself crazy. So start there. So again, I guess thinking back to the kind of 3 buckets that we talked on today, look at your board policies, look at the roles and responsibilities and who is doing the work or why, and then really honing in on those policies and procedures. Kathleen is sharing that she had a friend that Norway was not going to take our credits. Yeah, we're seen differently than we see ourselves, right? There's the resources again. We put them here, the Scalaro, that's the grade conversion. This was the translation services. Again, I'm sorry, we don't know the cost on that. And then Tanya, do you want to share about this book?
Sure, and I know that Luz is on this call right now up in Orange County. So she shared the resource that she used when she was doing this work in her county. So it's the new country index. There is a cost to it, but it's a great resource as well, just to get started with looking at ways that you can evaluate transcripts if you don't have, or are fortunate to have, a Rebeca at your hand. And I have to say that, as a school counselor, whenever I had enrolled a newcomer, it was so beneficial to know that that student had been welcomed beautifully into our district by an entire department and had access to Rebeca, a counselor who was there to just talk with them, introduce them into the way that our school system works, and to just make them feel comfortable and accepted. And that was a huge step in the process. They weren't just coming into a very busy counseling office and being kind of just eyes wide open. They actually had a nice introduction that set them up for success. So right off the bat, that message of, we welcome you, we are glad to have you, we understand you've got some differences with your transcript and we see it, and we are so glad that you're here. That alone, if you can even imagine yourself in their shoes, what that would feel like to come to a new country where you don't speak the language, don't understand the system, but to have people really welcome you with that, it just changes their whole feeling once they walk into the doors of a large comprehensive school. So getting those transcripts from Rebeca already done, it made me feel at ease too, because I didn't have to just go like, I don't know how to do this and I don't have time. I only have a 30-minute appointment with you or whatever. It just made things so much easier. So again, I know that not everyone is blessed to have a Rebeca or a resource like the Newcomer Center in their district. But again, these is about, like Tracy said, starting small, starting those conversations, start with your board policy. Take a look at ways that you can embed ed code into some of those conversations, because that's what your administrators speak. They speak code, they speak board policies. So that's your way to kind of welcome them into this conversation. So thank you all for being here. We do please appreciate your feedback. And as we've been going through our series, we started off strong with great responses on our surveys. And if you could just, this is the last workshop. This is the last time I'm gonna beg you. If you could just please fill it out. I know that Zarette put a link into the chat. And then we also have a QR code. You could just do it on your phone. It'll take you less than a minute, I promise. But I do look at that feedback. That's why we have this workshop here today. There was a need and we were able to address it because of the feedback you've been providing to give you the PD that is needed. And that's our goal, that's our aim. And so please, again, complete the short survey. Let us know other areas that you need support in so that we can provide that in the fall. And we are looking at possibly having something like this in the fall. So again, your input is super valuable and important. And I just want to say thank you to my colleagues, Tracy and Rebeca. I just appreciate you so much and all the work that you're doing. You know, I've known both of them for a very long time through various roles, and just it's so nice to be able to kind of tap into your friends to come and support our county and actually the state. We have a lot of people from all over on this important topic. So thank you so much for your work. Rebeca, thank you so much for all that you do, because it doesn't go unnoticed. And I know sometimes you can feel like you're on your own island, but you know, you are doing amazing work. And I appreciate the fact that you are willing to accept questions from others by email. She's even had people come from Northern California to see the work that she's doing. So she's very open to that and to helping you come up with your own system. So thank you, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Rebeca.
Just wanted to let you know that if you ever have questions or you want, I have had people that have a transcript and they don't know what to do with it. Email me. I'll be happy to take a look at it and give you some information about it or help you evaluate it.
Rebeca, which languages do you speak?
Many. I mean, I can read a lot more than I speak, but I'm fluent in 3. I mean, fluent. But I speak a lot more. I mean, I can communicate. I can butcher myself through a lot of languages.
So Spanish, French,
English, Italian, and then I can read many others.
anything with letters that look like English as far as using letters versus symbols.
Correct.
She can pretty much decipher.
Yeah. I basically I can if I can read it, I can decipher. I mean, I'm a linguist, so I can always find. So that's what this job was easy for me, I guess.
Someone just called you the transcript whisperer. I love that.
Thank you.
I'm not
There
a
was
good
also,
speaker.
yeah, there was also a great suggestion about bringing an international transcript and walking through that. Maybe for the fall, Tanya, is like bringing one from Mexico and kind of picking Rebecca's brain as we walk through each of those things and the why. I think that's really, really awesome idea.
Yeah, please put it in the evaluation. There's a spot just for that. Chat, it gets messy. So please, thank you. That's a great idea. I love it. So thank you again for coming and attending. If this was your first one or your 10th one, I really appreciate all the support out there. I hope you have a wonderful 3-day weekend and that it kicks off to a wonderful, well-deserved summer break. Thank you all. This has been a lot of fun to be a part of this community, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll take you out
Thanks,
with
everyone.
some music.
Bye.